Dunchbags, what's going on? It's Landon Remixes here, and welcome to the 27th edition of Rapid Fire Reviews, the series that started off as a lowly bit on my channel to feature 5 different albums or EPs that I didn't get a chance to talk about in a full review or didn't feel like I had enough to say about, but has quickly spiraled out of control into this insane thing that features God knows how many albums and EPs. If you've already watched any of the Rapid Fire Reviews videos I've done this week, you already know what's going on. Essentially, throughout the course of, well, late 2018 and early 2019, I guess by early, I mean the entire first half of the year, I let 128 albums and EPs kind of stack up on me, and I didn't really do anything about it. So rather than doing 128 different projects in one video and just driving myself insane, I am doing 4 different videos, and this is the final video of those 4. In all honesty, it's actually been a pretty fun week, and I'm kind of sad to be wrapping it up. It's been interesting having this amount of work ethic. I don't think I've ever put out 4 videos in a week before, at least since I've started doing reviews. Since this video will be largely wrapping up my thoughts and opinions for most projects I've been paying attention to throughout 2019, if I didn't cover your favorite album or EP, by that point you can probably assume that I'm not going to, unless of course it's releasing in September or has already released in maybe late August. In that case, it'll be filed in with the September rapid fire reviews that I'm going to do at the end of this month. But you know, I really do hope I got all of the bases covered in these 4 videos, because it took a ton of mental power to have all 128 of these projects kind of in the back of my mind this week. It was very difficult. Anyway, let's just get right into it so that I don't have to think about most of these projects ever again. Yeah, I don't know about this one, Chief. I was genuinely looking forward to seeing Brandon Burnett put out a full-length studio album, but this Emanate project, I'm just not sure how to feel about it. I think Burnett's strong suit is definitely writing more uplifting music, and that's probably why I ended up enjoying songs like IOU a lot more on this project than pretty much anything else. Most of this project just seems a little too dark, a little too edgy for him, and then the lyrics don't come off as all that great either, like the line about a woman having peanut butter thighs. Overall, I wouldn't say I enjoy this EP as much as Dimension, but I do think it does have a couple better standouts. Particularly, I thought Unspoken and Parachute are 2 of his best songs. There is a cool thing though regarding the relationships that these 2 EPs have with each other, in that I feel like you can kind of play them back to back and they function kind of as an album. Like if you play Dimension and then Outerworld immediately after that, you effectively get 10 tracks, you have an intro track and an outro track, and all the songs kind of work together. Though if these really are just 2 EPs that aren't meant to be connected in any way, it makes me really ache for what we'd possibly get with an Oliverse studio album. Honestly, the main takeaway I got from this EP is that I'm just really happy to see Direct doing Garage again, though I do think Direct and CloudNone make a really solid pairing, and I definitely like to see them do more work together in the future. I did want to point out though that the title track with Matt Van is just amazing. It's really everything that I wanted in Juliet and more. Matt's vocals are beautiful as always, and I feel like CloudNone and Direct really work together to make this instrumental that just fuses so seamlessly together with those vocals. Honestly, was not expecting a lot out of this project, especially after my massive disappointment with Wildworld, but I'll admit, Bastille pulled together for a very cool concept album with Doom Days. If you didn't know already, this album is essentially about a party that happens during the apocalypse, and there are quite a few layers to it all that are constantly crossing back and forth and referencing each other, like the apocalypse itself, the party that's happening, the relationship the protagonist has with a significant other. The lyrics on this album, especially on the title track, are a lot more socially conscious than you'd probably expect from a Bastille project. And yeah, this is just a really cool album to listen through and kind of imagine this party as it plays out throughout the night. This is definitely an interesting direction for Pierce Fulton to go in. I didn't really expect him to go the more club-centric route, especially after a project like Better Places. Not really much else to take away from this EP, and I honestly honestly don't think he's going to go in this direction for that much longer. I think it would be very strange for him not to go back into the more like pop singer-songwriter melodic influence stuff. I will say though, I do like Cold Water quite a bit. It kind of feels like a spiritual successor to No More for me, which is one of my favorites from him, so you know, that's one that I can see myself at least coming back to. Now, the first time I listened through this album, I honestly can't say I enjoyed it all that much, and I still don't think it's all that great, but I think in my mind I was kind of undercrediting it for the value that it has in, you know, melodic elements, meaning the melodies and the vocal chops are generally pretty solid across this project, but honestly, the only songs I really care about are the first couple on this project and the last couple. The rest pretty much just feels like filler to me with not much to offer. If it tells you anything, You Found Me is probably the highlight of the entire project for me, even though it almost sounds like it's something straight out of Brooks' discography. In all honesty, I'd have to say this is my least favorite studio album from Sakuraburst, though I would say it probably is her most cohesive. It tries to do a whole lot of different things at once, such as experimenting with the sounds of modern bass music. I think Glass River particularly sounds like it was inspired by some Heckler tunes, and then also doing a good job of representing the sounds of Venner and the sounds of Deconstructing Nature. I just don't think every song is necessarily a nail on the head like those two projects for the most part were. The highlight of this album for me is probably the tune with Slyleaf and Leopold, Bespoken Islands. Really solid EP from Barely Alive. In fact, I'd probably say this is my favorite multi-track project of theirs since their debut album. I like this idea of Barely Alive doing a project that's pretty much just showcasing different collaborators and the way that they kind of interact with those collaborators, because a lot of their stuff as of recent has pretty much just been solo. I think BA's got a lot of chemistry with most of the artists that are featured on this thing, and they do a really good job of blending their own elements in with that of their collaborators for a really, you know, smooth listening experience. The only thing that I'd really complain about is that I really wish on Crankin', the tune with Eliminate, that there was a 4 on the floor drop. I think that would have been a nice callback to Weeble Wobble, and it just feels like it fits. It just feels like it belongs, and it doesn't happen in the song. It's all just halftime, and it's kind of frustrating. Yeah, I'd say this is the worst multi-track project we've gotten from Knife Party to date. Not to say that this EP is just making my ears bleed the entire way through. In fact, I think it's a pretty decent project by like EDM standards. I just think it's very lackluster for Knife Party. The only song on this EP that really feels thematic and unique to me is the techno-influenced Ghost Train, which I think does a really good job of kind of immersing listeners into its specific atmosphere. I think the title track of this EP is honestly pretty atrocious, though knowing Knife Party, it's probably supposed to be. I can kind of see why Above and Beyond would want to go down this route to do an album that's a little bit more chill and ambient leaning. I mean, for me, a lot of the time it's those quiet, subtle moments that make Above and Beyond's studio albums really stand out, but I don't really see a purpose of collecting all of these types of things into one big project. It just, I don't know, it doesn't do much for me. I mean, if I'm trying to fall asleep, I'll just listen to Spacewalk 2 by Ramesses B, and if I'm trying to completely immerse myself for meditation, I'll just listen to Singularity by John Hopkins, so I don't really see a need to return to this project. This was actually a more enjoyable listen for me than I expected it to be. I've been off the Big Room hype train for a while, and therefore I didn't expect to get much from this album, but I actually got quite a bit. Really took me back into that height of Big Room in 2013 and 2014 with these big, powerful festival songs that reminded me why Blasterjaxx were one of the standout names in that era. Wouldn't go as far as to say I loved this album, but I do think it is pretty solid. In fact, I'd probably even put it above Hardwell's debut LP, and had it been maybe 4 or 5 tracks shorter, we might have been looking at a top 10 album of the year for me. I'll be honest, I was hoping for a full-length studio album coming from Conro after All Eyes on Me, and this EP is good, not as good as All Eyes on Me, but good enough. It sees Conro kind of moving in the 4 on the floor direction. More than anything, it kind of reminds me of pre-Better Places Pierce Fulton, especially on Stars, though I think Remember You and All I Want are the big standouts on this project for me. really everything else kind of just felt like outtakes from All Eyes on Me, and it didn't feel like this project was a meaningful artistic progression for Conro as much as that EP was. This EP felt pretty much just like Revelations for me, where the first track is pretty enjoyable, like Justice influenced electro, and then the other two are just kind of generic bass music bangers that I don't feel all that positive towards. And you know, the first track on this project I feel isn't nearly as enjoyable as Revelations from that last EP, so I don't know, not crazy about this one. First off, if you guys aren't acquainted with more Kismet, you should definitely do yourself a favor and dig into some of his stuff. Like, his album is insane. I'm so glad to be seeing him bringing his wild, sample-heavy, bombastic bass music style to Never Say Die, especially at 14 years old. This EP encaptures his style really nicely, even if adhering to more of a Never Say Die formula. If nothing else though, I definitely suggest checking out Escape and Breakdown from this EP. Insane. The first time I had ever heard of these guys was actually when I saw them live, opening for ODESZA on their 3-night run in Seattle, and I remembered watching them and kind of just thinking in my mind, like, these guys are pretty much just like Diet Disclosure, or, you know, I felt like I was watching a Disclosure cover band or something like that, from the way their music was styled to, you know, the way their live performance is set up. But on this EP, I feel like they've somewhat become their own. Don't think every track on this EP is absolutely perfect or anything like that, but there are some nasty jams here and just so danceable the entire way through. Skrillex has returned, and I guess it's not really much of a return because he has been releasing a pretty steady stream of music over the last few years, but this is his first EP in God knows how long, and his first like solo project in a while. Gotta be honest, I didn't really love either of the tracks on this EP all that much. My favorite of the two probably being Beam, but I'd say more than anything it is really nice to see those old Skrillex melodies and vocal chops kind of making a return into his new style, albeit probably not as well as he did on something like Face My Fears. This remix album doesn't really have a lot to offer me. It's just rhythm after rhythm after rhythm, and I really like a very small handful of the remixes on this project. Funny enough, I think my favorite remix of the bunch is actually the Slander and Shadient remix, although I think Shadient's production really carried that remix. It's probably why I like it so much. But I think the only remix that felt like anyone was having any fun on was really the Subtronics remix of Vault. I think he did a good job of kind of making that song his own. You know, I appreciate ATLiens and their more dark, minimalistic approach to bass music, but most of the songs on this EP really don't do that much for me. Though I think Closer, the collaboration with Eddie, is probably the best song I've heard come from ATLiens thus far. It's phenomenal. This EP is definitely not REZZ's most outstanding project. Can't say I really loved any of the songs off this EP. I think my favorite of the bunch is probably Lonely, followed by Stress and Dark Age, and Dark Age I don't even think is all that great. I think the guitars kind of have a creepy vibe to them, which I think is pretty cool, but the drop isn't anything to boast about. I was extremely underwhelmed by the tune with Underoath, Falling, which I had been anticipating for quite a while. I'm holding out hope that her next project's going to be better though. This album I'd say has pretty much the exact same problem as DJ Snake's first album, where it's just this convoluted mess of EDM and pop and rap with no rhyme or reason to it. Although this time I'd say that these songs are even less memorable. In fact, the only one that I think is all that worth digging into is the collaboration with Zomboy. I pretty much have the same thoughts about this EP as I did with Vibes Volume 2, where I don't feel like the quality and originality quite matches Left is Right, but there are a couple solid standouts. Particularly I think the song Warlords with Skrillex is really enjoyable. Kind of, to me it felt like a parody on, you know, Rhythm right now, that kind of culture. And I also think Do You is a really cool tune too. I don't want to sound biased here because some of you might know that I manage an artist who's featured on this project, but I genuinely think this is Chime's best EP to date. The wobbly UK dubstep influence stuff hits in all the right ways. Surface has Harvey's most developed vocal performance we've really ever seen from him, and I think Interdimensional, the title track with Ace Aura, is an absolute slammer, one of my favorite songs of the year by far. It just like progresses and develops so nicely throughout its running length. I don't really think this EP is for me. I mean, it's fine, but in my book, nothing really spectacular, not one of Flume's best projects, but I think him and Rayo Cragun have enough chemistry to make this project at least work in some capacity, and I feel like it opens the door for him doing more collab projects with other vocalists. I would love to see him do something with JPEG Mafia or Slow Tie. I know he's already done songs with them, but I mean a more extended project like an EP or an album even. All in all, I'd say this is the best multi-track project I've heard from IO thus far. Does a really good job of showcasing the kind of stuff you'd be likely to hear at an IO DJ set, which is definitely a good thing because I really enjoy IO's DJ sets. In addition to that, it was also really cool to see him do a more progressive house leaning track with Ghost in the Machine, and I also really enjoyed the Raito collaboration Come With Me. Overall, I wouldn't really say I enjoyed this album more than Lick's Dimension EP, but it is nice to see him kind of expand his horizons and tackle a bunch of different styles on this project, and the song Body is one of the best tunes I've heard come from him. So right now I'm in the process of editing this rapid fire reviews video, and I realized that I actually forgot to talk about the debut album from Moksi, The Return of House Music, which for the most part I think is a really solid house album. It does a very good job of paying respect to the classics while also being inventive and providing some new kind of cool little details here and there. However, I really feel like it's the first leg of this album that's really impressive. The entire back end of it, really, I found myself pretty bored with. I generally enjoyed this EP a bit more than Alien Boy, even though the title track of that EP is on this one for whatever reason. I still don't think it's quite up there with some of Oliver Tree's early work as just Tree, but you know, it's a decent project, and Hurt is an absolute jam. Can't say I enjoyed this one as much as Deleted. It kind of just feels like these two songs were thrown on together like semi-randomly, but the title track on this EP I actually really enjoy. It might be my favorite that I've heard from No Phone thus far. I really like the robotic noises that kind of just spew out during the drop. I think it's pretty cool, but the other track, I see, I don't even remember its name because it's just so forgettable. Maybe it should have been called General Kenobi, then I definitely would have remembered it. Didn't really love this EP, though I will say in its favor that it did a really good job of bringing me back to those early days of bass house when it was just the cleanness and the punchiness of everything that made me fall in love with the genre. I feel like this is something that, you know, the bass house scene needed. As funny as it is to admit this, my favorite track on this EP is definitely the Must Die remix of Castles, but I do quite enjoy the originals by Sudden Death as well, particularly Bleed, Terrible, and the Behemoth VIP. I really like this new, like, dark, deep side of Sudden Death. I think he pulls it off really well. If you're into melodic bass music in general, I would definitely suggest checking this album out. It's diverse, yet well-structured and cohesive. Skybreak's melodies are insanely good. I don't want to give away too much of the experience of this album, but like I said, if you're into melodic bass music, just trust me and check this one out. And the last project that I'm going to be talking about during Rapid Fire Reviews Week is this new EP from Memba, who I have been missing dearly since they left Monster Cat for Foreign Family. If you're into more unique future bass music, I'll use Drulu as an example. I think you'll really enjoy this project. Memba just has such a unique style, both in their production and their mixing, their blending of sounds. Everything always just sounds really cool from a listener's perspective. Particularly, I think Walls Down and Schools Out are two phenomenal tracks, and I definitely suggest checking out those two if you don't want to listen to the rest of the project. But if you've got the time, definitely give this full project a spin. And that's going to do it for this edition of Rapid Fire Reviews and for Rapid Fire Reviews Week. Like I said at the beginning of this week, I will hopefully never have to do anything like this again, but obviously Rapid Fire Reviews is going to continue to be a steady series on my channel as I move forward and do it hopefully once a month. As always, if you'd like to check out any of the albums or EPs that I talked about in this video, you can find the Spotify links down in the description below. And if you had any thoughts about anything that I talked about, if you liked it or you disliked it or you middle liked it, feel free to let me know down in the comment section below. If you're new here and want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe. When I hit 5,000 subscribers, I'm going to be doing a Minecraft special that I'm very excited about. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave me a thumbs up. Anyway, I'm Landon Remixes, and I'll see you guys soon. Peace.